Hello everyone. Let's celebrate Ni no Kuni today. When the first Ni no Kuni game came out in the West in January 2013, I was beyond excited. A game with a huge amount of input from Studio Ghibli was a dream come true for many of us, I know that.
It's so different.
Stop staring, man, it's rude.
But look at those goofy clothes.
Goofy? Are you blind? You are the goofy one round these parts.
Huh?
Look at his funny clothes.
Do I really look so strange? Just strange.
Crikey, we better get you a new outfit before they put you in the zoo. Come on, Ollie boy.
Okay.
I love that game to bits. There are a few things in it that I don't think are perfect, and I will talk about that in a little while. But overall, it's a wonderful experience. I think the very strong story and the emotional weight really make that difference. But today I want to look more closely at Ni no Kuni II. And to help me along, I have a tiny figurine here of the protagonist, Evan Pettywhisker of Tildrum. That's just one of those little items you can get as a sort of reward for loyalty points with Bandai Namco. It's sort of the equivalent of a prize figure, I would say. So here's the game, Ni no Kuni II, and the original as I got it on the PlayStation 3. That's obviously where I played it back in 2013, so that's now over 10 years. And then, obviously, I also had to get the PS4 version when it came out. While the cover images are different, very different, the design on the back is almost identical. The PS3 version says, "Step into an animated role-playing masterpiece," and the PS4 version says, "Rediscover a role-playing masterpiece, beautifully remastered." So why am I talking about Ni no Kuni II 6 years after it came out? And why had I never shown you the special edition before? Oh, there's a reason for that. There's a story, as always. Recently, I was just browsing through my Xbox Game Pass games, and I noticed that they have Ni no Kuni, I think both games on Game Pass, which is excellent. And that reminded me that I actually never really played Ni no Kuni II. What? I got this collector's edition back in 2018, and I haven't played the game? Does that make sense? Not really, no. I just started it up on Game Pass because it's so easy and quick to do it on there, and thought, well, I'll just quickly have another look. Do I still feel the same way about it? And I started it up, and I played, and I got to the point where I had given up 6 years ago, and I just kept on playing, and I thought, no, this is actually good. I'm fine with this. I'm enjoying myself. So I decided to dig out my collector's edition, picked up the PS4 game and restarted the point where I'd got to, which was pretty early on, and reacquainted myself with the world of that game. How is this game constructed as compared with the original Ni no Kuni? What do I like about it? What do I not like so much? Or what was the original stumbling block? Well, while I talk about that, let me take off the slip cover so you can see the beautiful box. Look, there's a portrait of Evan Pettywhisker on the side there. And the main illustration on the front of the box has also been reused in various promotional materials. It is really beautiful. You've probably seen this edition before. I think quite a few people got it. But it's nice to have another look at it years down the road now. So here we have what's called the Sound of Kuni II. It's lovely, isn't it? A pop-up. So in case you're not familiar with Kuni II, we have the three main characters, you can say. Evan Pettywhisker there in the middle, Roland, his advisor, who is someone who has been transported from our modern world into the world of Ni no Kuni, and Tani, a boisterous, stout-hearted young girl, a sky pirate's daughter. And now comes the slight disappointment I have with what is a vinyl, as people call it these days. I think you will agree this is one beautiful record. So what's the disappointment? And the music is, of course, by Joe Hisaishi. I don't know whether you could see it here when I held up the cover. There are only 2 tracks. The theme from Ni no Kuni II and track 2, The Curious Boy. To me, that's disappointing. What's the point of having an expensive and beautiful vinyl made, which is all presentation, but very little music? So back to the question, why did I not play the game back in 2018? And something spooked me, I think. It's a bit difficult now reconstructing it, but I loved the opening, which is very much an anime sequence with lots of cutscenes, very exciting, very fast-paced. And then once you've escaped, I won't say any more in case you haven't played it, you find yourself on an overworld that is sort of a bit similar in style to the first Ni no Kuni game. They don't seem to have evolved the overworld background technique a lot. It's okay, but I wouldn't say it looks stunning. But what freaked me out was that our protagonists were suddenly chibi, little tiny chibi figures, and it just looked weird to me. It was a complete break with the beautiful anime sequences, and that was just a bit of a shock, really. Ni no Kuni obviously didn't have fantastic textures for the overworld map, which is huge, but it looks okay, and they tried adding in a bit of detail here and there. Importantly, the figures of Oliver and Drippy are miniature versions of the actual anime-style character models. It looks just right to me. Let's have a look now at the Ni no Kuni II overworld. See the chibi figures there at Aunt Martha's cottage? The landscape textures don't look that much different to the Ni no Kuni ones, to me at least. They are possibly a bit sharper and a little bit more detailed. Here is a forested environment in the evening time, and once you enter battle, you see the transition from the chibi figures into a battle scene with the wonderful anime characters in full glory. And back to chibi. See what I mean? I actually have got used to it. It took me quite a few hours of playing, so it doesn't really bother me now much anymore. But in the beginning it certainly did. Here is the size of the overworld map. It's the one for fast travel. It's very convenient. It's pretty big. Do you guys think that Ni no Kuni 2 has a larger map, more ground to cover than the first game? I can't judge it as yet. This is the dungeon of Sundown Woods. And as in Ni no Kuni 1, these are some of the best environments in my opinion. You have your anime-style characters, as well as a somewhat more detailed landscape environment. The dungeons are always highlights for me in both games. And you see here again the seamless transition between exploring a dungeon and going straight into battle. And even the item drops on the ground are individually detailed. I love it. The only thing is you have to run around and pick everything up. I prefer it if you can just vacuum them up within a radius, especially with the amount of item drops you often have. Maybe we'll see that feature in Ni no Kuni 3. Here is one of those mysterious dream doors. I love it when a game gives me new intriguing features, and so far Ni no Kuni 2 has obliged. And then, quite quickly, you meet the Higgledies.
Oh, gentle. Dear part's another one now. Yes.
And you start using them in battle. There is a little introductory tutorial all while the action is rolling, and I think I just lost the plot a bit. There were suddenly a lot of Higgledies. They were all over the place in combat, so you had to not only direct your own party of 3, now you also have to keep an eye on your Higgledies and maybe use their power as well. And it just got a bit messy, I thought. I just wasn't feeling comfortable with it, I think. So at that point, I sort of trudged on a bit, but I never quite got the hang of it, I think. And I soon after sort of gave up and just moved on to something else and just never went back. I stored the box away somewhere, and I guess there was no particular compulsion on my part to return. Until that fateful day when I started it up on Game Pass and realised that I was actually enjoying myself, and that I, with a bit of time, got used to the chibi figures hopping across the overworld map. If there's one point where I would say they've made the wrong decision in Ni no Kuni 2, I would say it's with those chibi figures. I've got used to them. I can play with them just fine, but it's not as beautiful and exciting to me as Ni no Kuni 2, where they stayed with the drawn anime-style figures throughout. You go back to Ni no Kuni 1, and while I can see a few things where the art style is just a bit simpler, it still, in my opinion, just knocks your socks off. It is that beautiful. I just today replayed that first forest dungeon with the Guardian there. If you know the game, you'll know what I mean. And the whole environment is just so beautifully drawn. There is lots of detail there that they didn't have to put in, but they put it in because they obviously wanted to. This is the very first real dungeon you experience in Ni no Kuni, and I just want to show you how beautifully the developers realized this. Thoughtfully, they provide a save point at every dungeon entrance. Now just look at the detail, please, that they lavished on this scene. Not only do we have Oliver and Mr. Drippy in their full animation, which makes the scene really come alive, but the backgrounds are done with so much care and attention to detail, and the orchestral music is simply gorgeous. That just warms my heart, really. So, chibi figures, yeah, nah, but I can live with it. And that's the important thing, you know, something like that should not keep you from enjoying what is otherwise a good and enjoyable game. I sometimes hear people on social media complaining about Ni no Kuni II. It's a cheap cash grab, they say. And I think, what a really silly statement. On what evidence? Ni no Kuni II came out 5 years after the first game, so it's hardly a fast cash grab. And when you look at the amount of work they put into this sequel, there is no way you can accuse them of anything like that. I find that actually unpleasant. They're clearly very proud of the work they did with the art as well, and they've made an absolutely stunning art book with heaps of illustrations. This book is so huge, I'm struggling to show you the pages here. And as I was leafing through this art book, I was also thinking about how collector's editions have changed over the years. I've been collecting for about 10 years, and in that fairly short space of time, a lot of things have changed. And the big incisive moment, the caesura, you could say, was of course the pandemic, COVID. But to see an art book of this size and quality being produced today would seem almost unimaginable. There would be a huge cost associated with it. The book is heavy. I'm struggling with it. The paper is beautiful quality. It's a long time since I've handled paper like this. And the print quality is, of course, outstanding. So while I paid a lot of money at the time for this collector's edition, it now would seem laughable. You would never get something like this for the same amount. Impossible. The monster designs are just so good. This is a great treasure trove for aspiring artists. Looking at what does get selected for the final game and what doesn't would be hugely instructive, I think. The locations are amazing. Here's, of course, Ding Dong Dell, and another great favourite is Hydropolis. Then there is a beautiful steelbook featuring a disc inside the making of Ni no Kuni II, and 3 art postcards. As I mentioned, the main design on the box has been reused in many places. That's a lovely one of Evan and Roland, and one with a beautiful view, because in this game you have to build Evan's kingdom. That is the big task. The game does have some voice acting, but not really enough, especially cutscenes should always be voiced. Recruiting people for your kingdom is a smart idea, especially people with skills.
Look.
I smells a smell on the wind. That a progress. Seems the mangy dolls got tired of twiddling their thumbs.
So the people who had heeded Neil's call and flocked to the Heartlands set about building their new nation. And Evermore took its first faltering steps on the road to becoming a kingdom. A kingdom where everyone could live happily ever after. Just as Aranella had wished. Or so they hoped.
And here is Evan's new kingdom, Evermore. I have to tell you, it's just such a blast building this place. Everything is really easy to manage. You hit the ground running and progress is pretty swift. The main task will be finding people to run all these ministries and workshops and facilities. I can't wait to get out there and nab more promising people for the kingdom. If you like being kept busy, then this game is a goldmine. Conversely, if you don't like that, then this is definitely not the game for you. As your chibi character, you can actually walk around your town, your Evermore kingdom. You need to visit all the facilities to be able to make use of what they have to offer, which is quite a lot.
Come to do some shopping, eh?
There's not only shopping, but a lot of upgrading in terms of not just the buildings, but your skills and spells. You obviously need the right materials, so that's where the collecting comes in, and then there's a bit of basic crafting to do. And those are all things I very much enjoy, as you probably know by now. Here is Evan getting his fireball skill upgraded. And I decided to go the full hog on Tani's Spark Spide, maxing it out, which then triggered a new skill, a Shock Spike. These are familiar mechanisms for us JRPG players, but I'm always pleased to see them still being used. So I've now played about 20 hours since I picked it up on the PS4, and I now have the kingdom Evermore and the task of developing it, which means hundreds of side quests. Well, I love side quests. If they're well done and if they keep you looping the loop through the game loop, then that's just fine with me. And I think I'm going to enjoy them in Ni no Kuni II. I've dug in. I'm ready to commit a lot of time to this game and explore as much as I can. Try and get everything, all the treasure chests and all the Higgledies and whatnot. Whether you prefer the first game over the second game or vice versa, and I have heard both opinions, is really a matter of personal preference, as always. Sequels always have a hard task because they need to preserve some of what made the original game appealing. Obviously, you need to cater to the existing fan base, but you also need to introduce enough new features to keep up the interest and develop the game further. And everybody will probably judge that differently, whether Level 5 got the balance right between maintaining the old plus introducing enough new features. From what I've seen so far, my personal opinion is that they've struck a pretty good balance. I recognise a lot from the first game. You could even say a bit of copycat, I suppose. Instead of Mr. Drippy, we now have Lofty, the kingmaker, king's bond creature. Oliver has a spell called Gateway. It allows him to travel between this world, Motoville in his case, and the other world, the Ni no Kuni world. It's a fantastic mechanism for the isekai framework of this story, and I find it incredibly cool. It allows the story to be interwoven all the time between the characters and events of the two worlds, adding a very rich layer to the story. I haven't come across anything in Ni no Kuni II, at least so far, that would equal that powerful storytelling device. Ni no Kuni II, to me, seems to be more of what I would call a cozy JRPG. It's really a pretty traditional JRPG with a lot of other gameplay elements thrown in, like puzzles and extra dungeons and skirmishes, and of course kingdom building. So it's a very different type of game, really, and I feel that the story seems to be taking a bit of a backseat here, which is a shame. But it doesn't mean you can't enjoy the game. You just can't expect it to be another Ni no Kuni story like the first game. I've said it many times before, but I'll say it again. Fixed expectations can really sometimes ruin what is otherwise a perfectly good experience for us. Ni no Kuni II has much to offer, I think. I, for one, am happy to simply enjoy it for what it is. There's one element, one character in Ni no Kuni II where I have to admit I feel just a bit let down in comparison with Ni no Kuni I, and that is the character of Lofty. Cute as he is, and here you see him appearing for the very first time as the grand kingmaker creature for Evan. And it's of course very funny, but I just don't see Lofty as a really fleshed out, highly individual personality like Mr. Drippy. Mr. Drippy is just dripping with character. I remember I used to find Drippy just slightly annoying in the past, but actually replaying it now, I don't. I simply revel in the magnitude of his individuality.
And enthusiasm.
Well now, feast your eyes on that other guard there. Hup, and ha! He's got more get up and go than a sack of squirrels. If he hasn't got some enthusiasm to spare, I'm a monkey's uncle.
I wish Lofty had a bit more of that, and maybe also a slightly different design. With Lofty, they tried to copy the formula of Mr. Drippy instead of creating a new character essence. Lofty kind of represents the overall cozy and wholesome experience you will likely have with Ni no Kuni II, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think most people who have played both games would agree that Ni no Kuni I still has that edge. It gives you that incredibly special experience that very few games can give you.
And that's us joined forever!
There are lots of echoes, and of course the style is rather similar. We have two types of battles, one which you engage with directly on the overworld map, but the ones in the contained dungeons are quite different, because there you are all the time, in real time, in anime mode. It's a sort of seamless, almost seamless transition which I find really, really cool. Wouldn't it be great if one day they could make a game that would be completely like that, where they didn't have to use the tiny mode in the overworld or a chibi mode, and then you have the break when you go into battle, it looks different. That would be cool, I think, and on the new hardware we have now, that might be achievable. Let me know, who wants a Ni no Kuni 3 game? Please raise your hands. I would love one, I really would. So there's plenty of recognisable features there, but there's a lot that's new. The whole kingdom building thing. Some people are not into the town builder, city builder, whatever style of game. I don't play those types of games if they are like a dedicated town or kingdom building game. I've never been drawn to that. But having it as one element of a game is just fine by me, especially if it's an excuse for decent side quests. As you've probably noticed, I do like games that are hybrid by nature. For example, Rune Factory would be a really good example of a hybrid game. So are games like Danganronpa, which people often call visual novels, but they are in fact hybrid games with a lot of other game elements in them. I like the variety within the game. And there certainly is a lot in Ni no Kuni II. Sometimes I'm wondering whether they've almost overstuffed it like a Christmas stocking. There's yet another game mode in there called Skirmishes, which is a bit like army battles. It reminded me just a tiny bit of Suikoden, I think. It's like a really important mini-game within the game. I'm not terribly good at those skirmish battles, so I sort of try and get through them best I can. Not my favourite feature, simply as a personal preference. Other people love that kind of thing, so, you have to go with the flow. It's almost impossible with a game like Ni no Kuni II to say, I like absolutely every feature. That would be extraordinary. I don't, but neither would I say I dislike them. They're usually perfectly well done. I haven't had any major problems. In fact, I think there are improvements in the combat system. It is quite different from the original Ni no Kuni. For me, personally speaking, the combat system in Ni no Kuni 1 was a bit unwieldy. I used to work a lot in the computer world with user interface design and web design. There's just one iron rule. You do not make people click through so many clicks and buttons to get just to that one point. That's not good design. You try to streamline it as much as possible. To me, the combat system in Ni no Kuni 1 is a bit on the cumbersome side. You have to click on who's gonna act, the protagonist or one of your creatures. Then you have to choose what type of attack or defend mode, and so it goes. And there's several clicks there. I would have much preferred, a radial wheel option. They could have used the face buttons on the PS3 and PS4 to much better effect, I think. Why they did it that way, I don't know. Maybe because it was aimed at a younger audience, presumably. I can't say. But it's definitely not my favourite feature in Ni no Kuni 1. Those niggles don't mean that I didn't like or enjoy Ni no Kuni the game. Absolutely not. But for me it would have been better if those features had been a bit different. Another gripe a lot of people have about Ni no Kuni 1 is the system for retaining and restoring MP. And we face our first dungeon boss. Here we learn to defend ourselves. Knickers! That's good timing. Or flipping guard. I really can't be angry with Drippy for jumping in at every opportunity with a tutorial even during boss fights, because he's just so adorably funny. Here you see Mighty hitting him hard, and what happens is he drops glims, HP pearls, which during a boss fight we actually have the time and opportunity to go and pick them up as long as we're careful. But during the regular, everyday, random battles, which are very short, you don't really get the chance. But the gold glim here is trapped right between the Guardian's legs. And try as I might, I literally can't get at it. And there it goes. So I've had a bit of frustration with collecting glims, I have to say. I don't think it's the best mechanic for picking up items to restore HP and MP. Just to illustrate this glim situation further, in Random Fight on the overworld, you see how low Oliver is with MP. Did you see that one blue glim drop from the enemy just as he was keeling over? Well, there is no chance of you ever getting to that, and I found there were just too many situations like that, especially the MP shortage at the beginning of the game. It could have been solved better, I feel. I've heard a lot of complaints about that from other people too, and certainly for at least the first half of the game it is painful at times. We are in the desert region of Al Mamoon here. Here is a nice example of how a nice response triggers a heart, which then gives Esther the chance to recruit the creature. I found that this happened quite randomly though, and not very frequently, so if you were looking to recruit a particular creature, it could get a bit frustrating. Here is an example of how a hearted enemy, if you defeat him too quickly, I simply couldn't get Esther to get her harp out fast enough. Trying to recruit creatures when you're already at a much higher level than them is therefore a tricky undertaking. But in this battle, everything finally came together. A nice attack, a heart, and I managed to switch very quickly from Oliver to Esther. She had her harp ready. Success. Ain't she lovely? Many of those drawbacks I think they addressed in Kuni II, and I'm happy about that. The flip side of the coin in Kuni II now is that I think it might be, I wouldn't say the game overall is too easy. I can't judge that as yet. It's been just fine if I keep leveling up as you're supposed to. As you go through your tasks, then you're pretty much okay. But the bosses strike me as a bit on the easy side. And they also love putting in the sort of gimmick features for a boss fight. I just had one last night. I think it was Longfang. Yeah, in gold paw, that kingmaker creature. And it just got a wee bit messy. I wasn't quite sure whether I was doing the right thing. Well, obviously it must have worked because I defeated him. So here we get a tutorial in the middle of the boss battle about the Hig makers, which is slightly convoluted, I would say. So I'm trying to take all that in while coping with the map. There's an awful lot of flares and bright lights. At times it's hard to see what exactly is going on. All I know is I have to avoid the big fire pools. Easier said than done. There's a weak spot there. Okay, this circle I recognise. We can do something here. More Higmaker stones come tumbling down. We try and quickly eliminate them. I hope I'm doing the right thing. I don't like it when I don't actually know why I won a boss battle, if you see what I mean. I like to be able to know, and if I make a mistake, to learn from it. Having too much flashy showmanship can sort of get in the way of that. And I think the much older, the really classic JRPGs, they knew that so well. They really trained and educated you in how to play the game by doing it and learning to do it well. I sometimes think, not just Ni no Kuni II, but in general in modern games, they sometimes lose sight of that a bit. Okay, I was digressing here. That's just something that occurred to me that's been bugging me for a while, so I'm just throwing it out there. So we have one more item in the box. This is the extra piece. You know, like every collector's edition should have the basics, the game, artbook, the music. Hello, where's the music? I think I got the soundtrack anyway. I managed to find it, but yeah. And it should have a special item. Publishers put in anything from a card game, a figure, statue, a figurine. They try and think up all sorts of special things. And for Ni no Kuni II, they came up with something unusual but very fitting for the type of game it is. The complete main illustration wrapped all the way around the box, all four sides, really lovely. They call it a music box. So I don't know how well you can see it because of reflections on the plastic. It's not glass, it's plastic. So on the front you have Evan on his throne with Roland and Tani by his side, and on the other side we have just Evan on his new throne. So I'm sure you recognised the theme tune, and I've still got my docket from when I bought the collector's edition, 24th of March 2018. Ni no Kuni I is absolutely the bee's knees, and if by any chance you haven't played it yet, please do so. If you have any love for anime movies, Studio Ghibli, JRPGs, you really need to have a look at it. It's so often on special. You can probably get it for a really cool price on almost all platforms now. No excuse at all. You can metamorphose your creatures into a higher level form, just like Pokemon Evolutions. Isn't that great? I love Pokemon. And Ni no Kuni 2, if from my description so far it sounds interesting, absolutely yes. I think if you can find it, especially in a sale somewhere, you will not be disappointed. Are the two games connected? Only very loosely, because the sequel is set several hundred years after the events of the first game. You don't need to play the first game to play the second one. As always, thank you for your time. That was the King's edition of Ni no Kuni 2, and a look back at Ni no Kuni 1 as well. Ni no Kuni tried to turn the humdrum help files into something more appealing. So we get the telling stone, who is very ponderous and convinced of his own importance. But if you need a really in-depth advice and tips, the telling stone is wonderful. I do sometimes miss that in Ni no Kuni 2, where the help information is much thinner on the ground. I cannot predict whether they will meet your personal taste. That is always a bit of a gamble, really, with any game you pick. It is in the end impossible to predict. I loved the first game so much, I did not hesitate to pre-order the collector's edition for Ni no Kuni 2. And I had the surprise of my life when I just couldn't really get into the game. It just didn't click with me. It took me 6 years to find out that now I enjoy it. It's always worth giving a game another try. We are never the same gamer from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago as we are today. We all change, the way we look at things changes, and that means what we maybe didn't quite like years ago, we might now view very differently. It really depends what you're looking for. And I didn't know it, but Ni no Kuni 2 is really the game I was looking for right now in my life, the way it is now. This is the perfect game right now. It wasn't 6 years ago, but it is now finally. And I'm really grateful and excited about that. Please, keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye. The Ears of the Grimalkin.
Golly,